Prue Whitcomb stepped down from the noon stage at Larkin on Christmas Eve morning at 10:52, with her one carpetbag in her hand, and asked the porter to point her to Mr. Ren Halstead, and the porter said, "Ma'am, Mr. Halstead was called to Missouri yesterday at 4 in the afternoon by a plain, honest, small wire from his father's plank table. His father is dying. He will be gone at least a fortnight. His sister, Miss Ada Halstead, is at the boarding hotel across the square with a small, honest note for you." Prue Whitcomb, 29, in a plain gray traveling dress and a plain, small, dark bonnet, set her carpetbag down carefully. She said, "Sir, thank you." She walked across the square to the boarding hotel. Ada Halstead met her in the parlor. Ada was 34, in a plain green Sunday dress, with the plain, honest, small, kind eyes of a widowed sister who had been holding a plain, honest, small note in her pocket since 8 in the morning. Ada said, "Mrs. Whitcomb." Prue said, "Miss Halstead." Ada said, "Ada, please." Prue said, "Prue." Ada handed her the note. The note said, in Ren Halstead's plain, honest, small hand, "Prue, I have been called to my father's plank table at Cedar Falls on the strength of a plain, honest, small wire that arrived at 4 yesterday. My father is dying. I would not, in ordinary honesty, delay meeting you at the stage this morning. In extraordinary honesty, I must. I have asked my sister Ada to receive you at the boarding hotel and keep you at her expense, as long as it takes me to sit with my father and to bury him plainly. I would ask, plainly, whether you would sit at the boarding hotel with my sister for as long as it takes, and whether you would write me a plain, honest, small paragraph by return post at Cedar Falls, telling me whether the fortnight, or longer, is bearable. If it is not, I will pay your fare back home from Cedar Falls without expectation. If it is bearable, I will return as soon as I plainly can. Ren." Prue Whitcomb read the note. She read it a second time. She looked at Ada Halstead. She said, "Ada." Ada said, "Prue." Prue said, "Is your father Silas Halstead the plain, honest, small country judge of Cedar Falls, Iowa?" Ada said, "He is." Prue said, "Ada, my mother sat at your father's plank table in the fall of 1864, when your father heard my mother's plain, honest, small custody case for me and my sister Nan. Your father ruled that I was to be raised at Cedar Falls with my Aunt Prue Whitcomb, the elder, rather than with my cruel Uncle Reuben at Muscatine, and that Nan was to remain at Muscatine because Nan was over 15 and could plainly choose for herself. Your father is the reason I was raised by a kind woman rather than a cruel man. I owe your father plainly the whole of my honest, small childhood." Ada Halstead sat down slowly in the parlor chair. She said, "Prue Whitcomb." Prue said, "Yes." Ada said, "My father wrote me plainly at my plank table in June of last year, at Ren's private request, when Ren was drafting his advertisement for the Denver Ladies' Journal, that a plain, honest, small widow of Cedar Falls, named Prue Whitcomb, had been in his courtroom at 9 years old, in the fall of 1864, and had, in his private opinion, made the plain, honest, small impression of the most solemn small woman of 9 he had ever met in his court, and that if Ren were plainly going to advertise, my father asked plainly whether Ren would consider looking for a plain, honest, small widow of Prue Whitcomb's plain, honest, small kind. Ren wrote a plain, honest, small advertisement to that specification. Your reply arrived at Ren's plank table in September. Ren did not know your name plainly. Ren's advertisement asked only for a widow of Iowa, of quiet, honest habits. You answered as Mrs. Prue Whitcomb of Cedar Falls. My father did not, at any point, tell Ren that his own recommendation of type was the same specific woman. My father is a plain, honest, small country judge of a plain, honest, small dying kind. He wanted plainly at last to bring together in the plain, honest privacy of his own plank table memory the plain, honest, small 9-year-old widow of his 1864 courtroom, with his own plain, honest, small son. Prue Whitcomb sat down slowly opposite Ada. She said, "Ada Halstead." Ada said, "Prue." Prue said, "Please write to your father tonight and tell him plainly that his plain, honest, small courtroom impression was correct, and that his plain, honest, small 9-year-old widow has arrived on Christmas Eve at Larkin with her one carpetbag and is prepared plainly to sit at your parlor table, however long it takes. Ada said, Prue Whitcomb. Prue said, yes. Ada said, I will write him tonight. Prue Whitcomb stayed at Ada Halstead's boarding hotel for the fortnight of the Halstead grief and beyond. She wrote Ren Halstead a plain, honest, small paragraph by return post on the 26th of December, telling him plainly that she was well at Ada's parlor table, and that the whole of the plain, honest, small delay was bearable, and that she was, plainly, obliged to his father, Judge Silas Halstead of the fall of 1864. Ren wrote back with a plain, honest, small paragraph of 6 lines that said his father had received her plain, honest, small message at his plank table and had, at 91, laughed once, and had said, the small, solemn Whitcomb girl, and had died peacefully the following morning. Prue Whitcomb read the plain, honest, small paragraph at Ada's parlor table on the 3rd of January. She said, quietly, to Ada, Ada. Ada said, Prue. Prue said, please give me a moment. Ada said, yes. Prue Whitcomb went out into the plain, honest, small yard behind the boarding hotel and stood at the plain, honest, small fence a full minute. She came back in. She wrote Ren Halstead a plain, honest, small paragraph of her own that afternoon, informing him plainly that she had, at Ada's parlor table, wept once and only once for a plain, honest, small, dying kind of country judge, and that she would await Ren's plain, honest, small return at Ada's parlor as long as required. Ren wrote back from the plain, honest, small Iowa road with a plain, honest, small paragraph, informing her that he was riding at ordinary pace and would arrive at Larkin on the 15th of January. He arrived at 4 in the afternoon on the 15th of January. He tied his plain, honest, small chestnut mare at the boarding hotel rail. He walked to Ada's parlor. He knocked. Ada opened the door. Ren Halstead came in. He set his hat on the parlor table. He turned to Prue Whitcomb. Prue Whitcomb rose from the plain, honest, small parlor chair where she had been reading. Ren said, in a voice that surprised him by being steady, Prue Whitcomb. Prue said, in a voice that surprised her by being steady, Ren Halstead. Ren said, I have written you at Ada's parlor for a fortnight. I would like plainly, at last, to sit at Ada's parlor table with you at 4 in the afternoon of the 15th of January, over Ada's plain, honest, small coffee. Please, sit. Prue sat. Ada set the coffee down. He came out to Ada's parlor every afternoon at 4 for a week. He and Prue Whitcomb walked plainly through the plain, honest, small Larkin Square in the afternoons, and read plainly at Ada's plank table in the evenings. Ada, at the plank table on the 7th evening, said mildly, Brother, Prue. Ren said, Sister. Prue said, Ada. Ada said, I am going to bed early on account of a plain, honest, small headache. Please raise the plainer conversation. She left. Ren Halstead looked at Prue Whitcomb across Ada's plank table. He said, Prue. Prue said, Ren. He said, I have been in love with you since Ada's paragraph of the 27th of December, when Ada wrote me plainly at Cedar Falls that a plain, honest, small widow of Cedar Falls had arrived at Larkin with the plain, honest, small courtroom memory of my father intact, and was prepared plainly to sit at Ada's parlor table, however long it took. I have been holding it since. I am not holding it now. I would like to marry you plainly at Judge Callis's plain, honest, small Presbyterian church on the last Sunday of February. That is my plain, honest, small ask. Prue Whitcomb said, Ren Halstead. Ren said, yes. Prue said, I have been in love with you since your paragraph of the 4th of January, when you told me plainly that your father had laughed once at the small, solemn Whitcomb girl, and had died peacefully. That paragraph was the plain, honest, small paragraph of a plain, honest, small son, of a plain, honest, small kind of country judge. I would like plainly to marry you at Judge Callis's plain, honest, small Presbyterian church on the last Sunday of February. That is my plain, honest, small yes. Ren said, then it is settled. The circuit preacher married Ren Halstead and Prue Whitcomb at Judge Callis's plain, honest, small Presbyterian church on the last Sunday of February. Ada Halstead gave the bride away, old Sylvan, Ren's foreman, stood witness for Ren. Prue's sister Nan rode down from Muscatine for the wedding at plain honest small last, at Prue's plain honest small private request. Nan and Prue had not seen each other, plainly, in 23 years. Nan and Prue sat at Ada's plank supper table the evening before the wedding and spoke plainly for 4 hours. Nan said, at the end of the 4 hours, "Sister." Prue said, "Sister." Nan said, "Uncle Reuben died in 81 of a plain honest small liver sickness at Muscatine. He left me a plain honest small paragraph of apology, in his own honest hand. I have kept it in my drawer 6 years without reading it plainly. Please read it aloud to me now. I would like plainly for a plain honest small country judge's plain honest small daughter to hear the apology in her own honest voice." Prue read the plain honest small paragraph aloud. Nan wept once. Prue wept once. They finished the coffee. 2 years on a warm September evening at the Halstead Ranch, Prue Halstead sat on the porch step with Ren beside her and their small son Silas, named for Ren's late father, 10 months old, asleep against her chest. Ada Halstead sat in the porch rocker with her mending. Nan Whitcomb, at Muscatine, had opened a plain, honest, small mercantile mending business of her own on the plain, honest, small suggestion of Ada, and had, at 52, written Ada plainly, the previous Thursday, to say the plain, honest, small business had, in 6 months, taken over the whole of the Muscatine mercantile mending trade. Ren said, "Prue." Prue said, "Ren." He said, "The photograph." Prue said, "Yes." The plain, honest, small photograph on the mantel was of Judge Silas Halstead, in his plain, honest, small courtroom at Cedar Falls in the fall of 1864. At his plain, honest, small plank bench, with his plain, honest, small gavel set to one side. He was, plainly, the 9th version of a plain, honest, kind country judge, who had, at last, arranged plainly the plain, honest, small courtroom impression of a plain, honest, small 9-year-old widow for his own plain, honest, small son. Ren kissed his wife's temple. The pasture went to gold. Silas dreamed. Ada mended. And Prue Whitcomb Halstead, who had stepped down from the noon stage at Larkin on Christmas Eve morning at 10:52, with her one carpetbag in her hand, and had heard the porter tell her plainly that Mr. Ren Halstead had been called to Missouri, put her cheek against her husband's shoulder, and understood that the good, slow country had, in its good, slow way, given a plain, honest, small country judge at 91, one last plain, honest, small courtroom arrangement, and had, on the strength of one plain, honest, small note left at the boarding hotel and one plain, honest, small Christmas Eve, given her back not just the plain, honest, small childhood memory of the 1864 courtroom, but the whole rest of a plain, honest, small household under the Halstead Ranch's plain, honest, small mantle, where Judge Silas Halstead's plain, honest, small photograph plainly now sat. And so it had.